And picking up on that, we hear all the time that the players see the British and Irish Lions as the pinnacle. Why is it that the rugby, people who run rugby in the home nations don't seem to have that same ideal? Why is there always the problems of releasing players, the Premiership, all of that kind of stuff? I appreciate it comes down to money, but
looks like Bruce has got an answer.
Yeah, Bruce, come on,
Well, this is what frustrates us all. This is something we spoke about off screen. This is where the ideals of rugby are in competition, in direct competition with making as much money as possible. Look at what's happened in football and the outcry about who was forgotten. And who was forgotten are the people who stand on the terraces. But unfortunately, they're a finite resource. They pay that amount for the ticket and that amount for the replica shirt, and then deal's done. They need all the other bits that go with it. And the Welsh Rugby Union did a brilliant thing for the women's team this week about playing for the girl that first started, and I thought that was superb. That plays to me brilliantly. That's the emotional connection I need and want with my players, with the teams that I support, and that's why I love the Barbarians, because it's playing for the sake of playing. And that's why the Lions is not for the sake of playing, but it's in an environment that is only every 4 years. It could be once in a generation. Depending on when you're born, you could completely miss out. One injury takes you out of being a Lion forever. Depending on who gets picked as a captain, you pick an Irish hooker as the captain, and the best hooker in the British Lions doesn't get to play in the test. Those things are huge. And players, I'm not sure that many players grow up wishing to be a British Lion. Players grow up wishing to play for their country, and it's only when they grow and develop and see what that means that I think the Lions becomes a thing, because it's not right in front of you all the time. It's every 4 years. But I was 17, about to turn 18 in 1997. I know it doesn't look like it, Rachel. Okay, I'd see you laughing there. But that 97 Lions team, I can tell you all the players. I've luckily spoken with Bentos a few times, and as his wife says, he played one game and he's been able to dine out on it for the rest of his life. Doddy Weir's a huge hero of mine. Gregor got to go, and one of the questions I ask him every single time is, why didn't you go for the drop goal? Because now Gusket is the one who's on every reel in it, and as Gregor, why did you take the ball into contact? Why didn't you go for the drop goal? So those things are hugely meaningful to me, because it's an untouchable. I've never seen the Lions play because they never play here. So it's this huge deal. It's this romance around the whole thing and we also become this different breed, where we knock lumps out each other and we have banter with each other during that Six Nations spell, and then all of a sudden we're on the same team. How amazing is that when we come together to be strong? And like Owen said, they knock lumps out each other on the pitch, but the fans don't. The supporters don't. The supporters embody everything that we love about it. And I hope I'm never here to see that change. And it's that romance of the Barbarians, of the Lions, of playing for your country in front of 70,000 people, not playing in front of the ball boys and the subs and the journalists up in the box. And it's those moments that make it. And like Owen said, I've never met a Lion who hasn't got 10 stories to tell, new mates that they didn't realize, a different opinion on certain people that they didn't and those go with them forever and ever and ever. And those are only the ones they can share, which is even better.
Yeah.
Rachel,
they've got a whole other 10 lot of stories that they can't share.
Rachel, there's a really interesting thing there about amateur and professionalism, and about the whole ethos of rugby and everything. And obviously, you've been there for the switch from ladies amateur to into professionalism. Did that change things? And do you see there being a ladies British Lions and Irish tour at some point?
Yeah, well, I think your first question, Bruce is up for it. Fundamentally, amateur versus professional, there's a huge difference. I remember when we first went professional in 2014, and the first questions we started to say to each other was, how on earth did we do this before? Because the time and the effort and the life outside rugby doesn't exist really, because everything is consumed. So of course, there's a huge difference between amateur, professional, and also there's different ways of being professional within the women's game. You know, you have some players who are maybe match fees, or there's semi-professionalism. That the women's game is at very different stages of that professional side of things. And we've had the recent global women's calendar that's been released now, which is obviously going to add more pressure for more time to be away, more assembly days for squads. So does that then push unions to look at investing more into their sides because of the amount of commitment that is going to be coming up? And then on top of that, you throw in the conversations that are happening and have been happening. It's not new. There's been in the last couple of years that they've been talking about the British and Irish Lions for the women's game. But what they're doing rightly is not going, right, we'll carbon copy and we'll run how the men's run, because it's not the same. Like, the competition isn't the same. The makeup of it isn't the same. So you don't want to do something for the sake of it. And if we were just to follow the men's, that's just ticking a box to me and going, all right, look, morally we should be doing this, as opposed to actually going, right, let's work out what is going to be the best thing for the British and Irish Lions women's team, how we then go about that. Let's really put some thought behind it. Let's not rush it, because you want it to have the legacy that the men's have. You want it to go on and you want it to create its own history. And if we just kind of brush over it and go really quickly and think, oh, well, we must have a women's one, so we'll just jump on it, then it's going to fail. And that's the last thing that we want for it. So I'm hugely excited the fact that conversations are happening, detailed research is going into it. And yeah, we'll see where we are in the next sort of couple of years and what that looks like, and how they look to build it out. I haven't been a part of the Barbars yet, but hearing amazing stories about that collectively coming together. I played a lot of rugby for Samurai Sevens, which is where they bring in all different internationals. And, as Bruce says, the best stories are there. The best stories are with those groups. And so hopefully, knowing that a little bit myself, I know the kind of the buy-in that you would get from a British and Irish Lions women's team as well.
I just add, Mark, that it's like everything in rugby. I think it was very recently that World Rugby said that rugby's poor to the tune of around £1 billion from the pandemic, and what that's done. Clearly the Women's World Cup has been postponed for 12 months. The chat at the turn of the year before that was that a lot of very big sponsors were going to be putting half their marketing budget towards the women's game. We've seen in the recent Six Nations that Ireland and especially Wales they're just off the pace. And as Rachel just said, the difference, I remember speaking to Lynn Cantwell, the difference between amateur and professional is just it's just huge, isn't it? And you think about some of these of the Welsh girls have been having lots of grief on social media, and some of their partners have been saying, look, she's up at 5:30 in the morning, then she's trained, then she's got to work as a paramedic, then she's got to come home, go back to it's very, very tough. And I think to Nolly Waterman, quite a bit, who's another very strong advocate for the women's game. So it's a bit of a bugger, this pandemic. It has set things back, and then look at the sevens game. The sevens game is another one that is seen as an absolutely key entry point into rugby, almost much easier than the 15-a-side game. But again, they've been scrapping for their lives. Almost, I think the England boys are kind of crowdfunding for money to get them to Tokyo. So it's such a shame, because whether you like it or not, when we talk about CVC and private equity, which is here to stay by the looks of it in all sports, over 700 million will have been put into rugby union, but instead of kind of enhancing the product, it's almost bailed it out, isn't it? And I think that's such a shame. It will take time, but where there's a will, there's a way. And I think the coverage in women's rugby has grown exponentially, hasn't it, over the last few years, Rachel? Would you say there's so many more voices in the media? Yourself, Maggie, Nolly, Emily Scarrett's got her own podcast. Obviously Nolly has lots of podcasts around, as we know. But yeah, there is a lot more. It's a bit of a chicken and egg, isn't it, really? If you don't get the coverage, no one talks about it, but you kind of need it to kind of get the sponsorship money and so forth. But yeah, I think it's, as you just said, it's, you probably couldn't do it South Africa and Australia. You've got to forge your own way. France would seem to be a sensible place to go. And how cool would that be, wouldn't it? Women's kind of Lions in France, where they're getting some great crowds. So
One of the fabulous things about this situation has been, Burf, you might, I hope you agree, but I think a lot of really positive female role models have been able to find that platform because it hasn't been as busy. And Rocky Clark is on everything. Tammy Taylor, yourself. There's a whole number of really positive role models, because while it's great that Ugo is talking about it, it's being able to see those role models, and for amateur players to see, right, I'm still in this. And I feel like you are all very accessible, whereas quite a lot of the professional male players who have become superstars, they've become a bit like footballers. They're not accessible anymore. Whereas you guys are still in that point, which I think is hugely influential. I'm a dad to two girls who absolutely worship Rona Lloyd and who know Helen Nelson, and who, they love Jade Conkle, who unfortunately has had to step out the game for a while to get real life going, which is a real shame. And it's easy to sling mud at Wales and at Scotland, but if you take Jade Conkle out of that Scotland 15, that's a big miss. And also, because she's been a staple in that position, no one else has really had a go to take over. COVID hits and there was no chance to bed anyone in or give them the experience or let them learn alongside Jade. It was just, right, go for it. You now need to replace Jade Conkle. But for my girls to be talking about rugby, and I saw Bod came out with something about his daughter asking, is that something girls can do? Those are crazy questions for us to be asking now. Those are absolutely ludicrous questions. My girls know that anyone can play rugby and that they should be allowed to, but they also know that anyone should be able to play netball or go swimming or do gymnastics. It's now no longer just for him or just for her. And I think, Burf, you and a lot of those World Cup winning colleagues are doing a fantastic job of promoting the game and making it something that's exciting. It's not, you're not selling a dud product. You're selling a bloody good product.
Absolutely. And I think, thanks for that. And I think that kind of group of players that, Owen, also you're mentioning, like Tam, Rocky, Nolly, like, I think we feel a real sense of responsibility, and that we've got it. Like, I would be absolutely nowhere without the game of rugby, and I want other young girls to know that. And so I feel like there's a real responsibility to keep shouting about it, keep pushing the boundaries, keep, knocking on the door saying that's not good enough, or this is good. Yeah, let's keep pressing with that. Because, it, like you said, it's such a brilliant product, and there's so many great opportunities. And I think that accessibility, I think we understand that we've got a job to do. We can't just rely on the media to do it. We can't just rely on unions to do it. We've all got to work really collectively to get it to a point where, we haven't got to be on 15 podcasts leading up to the Six Nations to get a bit of a chat around it. But that's the whole bit. Like, we're really passionate. We love it. We've had great opportunities ourselves, and we just want to replicate that. And so, yeah, I think, the accessibility to players is because they understand and know what responsibility lies within them.
The other bit for you, Burf, I think, is that there's life after. Well, I know you're still playing, but you're not playing for England, but you've still got a voice, and you're showing that you can, yes, play, but then you can be on TV, you can be on a podcast, you can have a social media following, you can have your other sidelines like lots of male players do with their coffee companies or what. And to me, that's as positive as get out there and be a player. It's that rugby, and Holly Davidson, again, my girls know Holly Davidson getting some of these refereeing gigs. It's still coming as a smash of a glass ceiling, whereas actually she's a bloody good referee. It doesn't matter that she's female. She's a bloody good referee. But I think they did the fly on the wall. World Rugby did the fly on the wall with Holly. Great access. Brilliant little bit to show, actually, yes, she can play, but there are other roles to fulfill as well. And like you've just said you'd be nothing without rugby. I'm not quite sure that is true, but I can see what rugby's done. I can see what rugby's done for you, and trying to give, Holly had a career, and it was a gamble to become a referee, but it was a gamble that was worth it because she did something she loved. And if you love doing it, you tend to get better at it. And it's selling that message to, mums, dads, daughters, son, it doesn't matter, promoting that positive and that reward that you get for life by being involved in the game of rugby. I think that's what you guys have done absolutely superbly well.
And just lastly, Mark, before we jump elsewhere, is that, when we talk about the accessibility as a journalist, I worked at Chelsea. I've done a little bit of stuff in football, and you're right. There's almost a kind of an imaginary kind of distance between the players and the fans. A lot of it is down to money. I remember going to Oxford Street. There was a Chelsea kit launch, and I was on the coach with the Chelsea players. And you are talking Arsenal fans, Tottenham fans, throwing gestures to the coach as you were driving up. And when we got there was probably 4,000 fans at the Oxford Street Adidas store. And, John Terry gets off, everyone goes crazy. Frank Lampard, Florent Malouda, Michael Ballack goes crazy. I got off the coach, it was tumbleweed. Absolutely. No one knew me whatsosoever. And then
did you still give a wave?
Yeah, give a wave. Like,
autograph, anyone want an autograph?
But no, it's just that in rugby, the players are still pretty accessible, and then the male players, you still got to kind of run the gauntlet of going through press officers, going to sponsors, going through agents, and to be honest, there's often a lot of roadblocks. But I have never found that with any of the women. They are so. It is almost like the male players maybe 20 years ago. They're just free, give them a ring, really happy to chat. And that bodes well really with journalists being able to tell their stories, because if you're always putting up roadblocks to getting access to these players and telling stories for the youngsters kind of look up to and see the personalities behind it, then it's a good thing. So let's keep that going.
Well, I'm going to have to say you've talked us out of time now, you three. So, but before we wrap this up, we're going to do a little prediction, but we're not going to do the score lines and that at the moment. Let's forget about that. Let's just go back to that original question: who's going to be the Lions captain? So let's start with you, Rachel. You can go first. Who's your Lions captain?
I'll go a bit out there because I think I'm guessing who Bruce and Owen's going to go with. I'm going to say Stuart Hogg. I think he's got, I won't go into it because we've run out of time. I'll go Hoggy.
We'll remember that one. So, Bruce, you go next. You can have first dibs.
See, I thought I was going to be laughed at there, Burf, so I'm delighted with that. You've taken the Hoggy. I know he's old man. He sent me a message recently. I would love it to be Hoggy, but I think it would be a forward. So I'll toss the coin. I'm going to say Alan Wynne Jones.
Oh, well... Owen,
toss that
safe
you going
coin. Now? Are you going to have to jump on Bruce's bandwagon, or are you going to go out on your own? What are we going with?
I'm afraid Alan Wynne Jones is a safe pair of hands. Obviously, Maro had a Six Nations where he gave away a huge amount of penalties. He hasn't had a huge amount of captaincy experience. Alan Wynne's the set. And again, Gats hasn't got a huge amount of time. He's got a smaller squad. He'll be going with familiarity, I think. And again, they're going to have a team of leaders. So,
you haven't actually said anyone yet. Come on.
Wynne.
So who are you going with?
Alan Wynne.
You can't. Bruce has got him. You've got to have your own.
Is that the rule? Okay, I'll go with Maro then as the second.
Excellent. What do we win?
I'll think of something. Okay. We'll put some little prize in for the very last one of the year.
You get a Scotland Rugby Ball Light, Burf.
Oh yeah, that's why I picked Hoggy, because I think I'm in the real camp of Alan Wynne Jones. But yeah.
Excellent. Well, listen, guys, thank you so much. We'll see you next time. I think we're due on in about 6 weeks' time. So stay safe till then, and thanks ever so much. And we'll see what happens in the next round. So fantastic. Thanks for joining us.